The sun beamed down on the suburban grocery store as Karen Whitefield turned into the parking lot. She maneuvered her SUV into a space near the entrance, but immediately bristled when she spotted Daniel Carter unloading bags from his car nearby. "That's my spot," she muttered to herself. It wasn't labeled or reserved, but Karen was certain she always parked there. Grabbing her purse, she marched over, her heels clicking against the asphalt. "Excuse me," she called sharply. Daniel, a tall black man in his early 30s, looked up. He wore a casual but neat outfit, a button-down shirt and dark jeans, and his demeanor was calm. "Yes," he asked politely. "That's my parking spot." "I always park there," Karen said, crossing her arms. Daniel glanced at the unmarked spot. "I didn't see any signs indicating it was reserved. I'm sorry if this inconvenienced you, but I'm already parked and about to head inside." Karen's nostrils flared. "You people always think you can do whatever you want," she snapped. Daniel's expression remained steady, though her words stung. "Ma'am, I suggest we both go about our day. I have groceries to buy." Karen huffed, but Daniel walked toward the store, refusing to engage further. The interaction left her fuming, and she vowed to make her dissatisfaction known. Karen gripped the handle of her cart tightly, scanning the store for the man who had stolen her parking spot. Spotting Daniel in the produce section, she watched him closely, her irritation growing with every moment he spent perusing the neatly arranged fruits and vegetables. He appeared too comfortable, too at ease in what she perceived as Herb's store. It annoyed her. She pushed her cart forward, pretending to examine a nearby display of organic apples, but her eyes never left Daniel. When he moved to the gourmet cheese section, she saw her chance. With an exaggerated sigh, she rolled her cart next to his. "Excuse me," she said sharply, drawing the attention of a few nearby customers. Daniel turned toward her, his calm expression unchanged. "Yes." Karen gestured toward his cart. "You seem awfully interested in the higher-end items here. Are you sure you can afford them?" The comment hung in the air like a thunderclap. A young mother nearby froze mid-reach for a pack of crackers. An older gentleman looked up from his shopping list, his brows knitting together in surprise. Daniel, however, remained composed. "I'm sorry, what did you just say?" he asked, his tone even but with a slight edge of disbelief. Karen crossed her arms, emboldened by the attention. "I just meant that it's easy to get carried away with expensive items, and I wouldn't want you to overspend." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line. "I appreciate your concern, but I think I'll manage just fine." Karen sniffed, undeterred. "Well, you know, I've seen some questionable behavior in this neighborhood recently. Just saying." Daniel's patience was wearing thin. "Ma'am, are you implying something about me?" Karen straightened her posture, adopting a mock-innocent tone. "Oh, no, of course not. I'm just looking out for the store, that's all. It's a shame when people take advantage of places like this." Her insinuation was clear, and Daniel was about to respond when Ella, a young cashier, approached cautiously. She had been stocking shelves nearby and overheard the exchange. "Is everything okay here?" Ella asked, looking between the two. Karen jumped on the opportunity. "I'm glad you're here. This man has been acting suspiciously. I think it'd be best if you kept an eye on him." Ella blinked, taken aback by Karen's words. "Suspiciously? Ma'am, I don't see." Karen interrupted her, raising her voice for everyone nearby to hear. "Just look at him. He's got all these expensive items in his cart. It's not normal." Daniel inhaled deeply, his expression calm but his voice carrying a quiet authority. "You're making quite the assumption, aren't you?" Ella's face flushed with embarrassment, but she stood her ground. "Ma'am, we don't profile customers here. If Mr. Carter—" She stopped herself, realizing she had used his name, but Karen didn't notice. "Profile? Oh, don't be ridiculous," Karen said dismissively. "I'm just trying to protect the store from potential theft." "You should be thanking me." Ella's fists clenched at her sides. "Ma'am, unless you have a specific concern, I need to ask you to let our customers shop in peace." Karen's eyes widened, as though she couldn't believe someone would dare challenge her. "Excuse me, do you know who I am?" Ella hesitated but didn't back down. No, ma'am. But I know that Mr. Carter hasn't done anything wrong. Karen glared at Ella, then turned back to Daniel. Fine, if you're so confident, let's see how this plays out. I'm going to speak to the manager. She pushed her cart away with a dramatic flourish, leaving Ella and Daniel standing in the aisle. Ella turned to him, her voice soft. I'm so sorry about that. She's known for this kind of behavior. Daniel gave her a small smile. Thank you for stepping in. It's not your fault. Ella nodded, though the interaction clearly unsettled her. I'll be nearby if you need anything. As Daniel watched her walk away, he couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and frustration. This wasn't the first time he had dealt with someone like Karen, but it didn't make the experience any less exhausting. He took a deep breath and resumed his shopping, hoping the confrontation was over, but knowing, deep down, that it wasn't. The tension in the grocery store was palpable as Karen's accusations echoed through the aisle. A small group of curious shoppers paused their own tasks, casting glances toward the unfolding scene. Daniel stood calmly, his expression unreadable, while Karen, emboldened by the gathering attention, jabbed a finger in his direction. This man is acting suspiciously, she repeated, louder this time. I don't think he's here to shop at all. He's just trying to make trouble. Ella, the young cashier who had tried to defuse the earlier tension, hesitated. She glanced at Daniel, then at Karen, her own discomfort visible. Before she could respond, the deep, steady voice of Security Officer Brown interrupted. What's going on here? He asked as he approached the group. A tall, imposing man in his late 50s, Brown carried himself with the calm authority of someone who had seen more than his fair share of conflicts. His salt-and-pepper beard and sturdy frame gave him a commanding presence, and his uniform only reinforced his role. Karen turned to him eagerly, as though he were her savior. Oh, thank goodness you're here. This man has been acting suspiciously, and I think he's planning to steal something. Just look at him. Brown's eyes shifted to Daniel, whose calm demeanor didn't falter, and then back to Karen. He noted the way she clutched her cart, her face flushed with a mix of righteous indignation and anticipation. Her voice carried the self-assured tone of someone who expected to be taken at her word, without question. Ma'am, Brown began, his tone even. What exactly did you see him do? Karen faltered slightly. Well, it's not what he did, per se. It's how he's behaving. He's acting sneaky, like he doesn't belong here. Daniel raised an eyebrow but said nothing, letting the scene play out. Brown studied him for a moment, then turned his gaze back to Karen. So, you didn't see him take anything? Karen straightened her back. No, but I'm telling you, I can feel it. People like him. You just know when something's off. Brown's jaw tightened, but his voice remained neutral. Ma'am, I'm here to ensure the safety and comfort of all customers. Unless you have proof that someone's broken a rule or committed a crime, there's nothing for me to act on. Karen's face reddened. Are you seriously going to ignore me? I'm trying to protect this store, and you're just going to let him. That's enough, Brown said firmly, his voice cutting through her tirade. He turned to Daniel. Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience. Is there anything I can assist you with? Daniel shook his head. No, thank you, Officer Brown. I'd just like to finish my shopping in peace. Karen's frustration reached its peak. Peace? Oh, that's rich. He's disrupting everything, and you're just letting it happen. Brown sighed, his patience clearly wearing thin. He stepped closer to Karen, lowering his voice so the surrounding onlookers couldn't hear. Ma'am, I've worked security for years, and I've dealt with actual thefts and disturbances. What I'm seeing here isn't that. What I am seeing is someone making a scene and disrupting other customers. I'm going to have to ask you to either continue your shopping quietly or leave the store. Karen's mouth fell open. You're siding with him? This is unbelievable. Brown didn't flinch. Ma'am, this is your last warning. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing more, storming off toward the front of the store. Brown turned back to Daniel. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. If there's anything I can do to make this right, let me know. Daniel gave a small, appreciative nod. Thank you, officer. I'm fine. I'll just wrap this up and head out. Brown smiled faintly and tipped his hat before returning to his post. Daniel resumed his shopping, aware of the lingering stares but refusing to let them unsettle him. Ella, who had been watching the exchange from a distance, stepped closer. "I'm so sorry for all of that," she said softly. "I wish I could have done more." "You already did plenty," Daniel replied, offering her a kind smile. "It's not your fault, and you handled yourself well." Ella nodded, though the encounter had clearly shaken her. As she walked away, Daniel reflected on the encounter. It wasn't the first time he had experienced something like this, and it likely wouldn't be the last. Still, he was determined not to let it define him, or his day. In the distance, Karen stood near the customer service desk, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She was speaking to an employee in hushed, angry tones, gesturing in Daniel's direction. Whatever she was planning, Daniel knew this wasn't the end of their confrontation. Aaron's frustration boiled over as she stomped toward the customer service desk, muttering under her breath, "I'll fix this myself if no one else will. This is ridiculous." The young customer service representative behind the counter, a petite woman with a nervous smile, looked up as Karen approached. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I need to speak to the manager," Karen demanded, her voice sharp. "Immediately." The representative hesitated, her smile faltering. "Is there something I can assist you with?" "I said, get the manager," Karen snapped, slamming her palm on the counter for emphasis. Several nearby customers turned to look, their faces a mix of curiosity and discomfort. The representative quickly picked up the phone and dialed. Within moments, Melissa Grant, the store manager, appeared from the office behind the counter. Melissa was in her early 40s, with a professional yet approachable demeanor. Her sharp blazer and sensible shoes gave her an air of authority, but her warm brown eyes softened her presence. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Melissa said as she approached. "I'm Melissa Grant, the store manager. How can I help you today?" Karen wasted no time launching into her tirade. "Finally, someone who can do something about this. There's a man in your store acting suspiciously. He's in the gourmet section now, probably planning his next move. He's carrying expensive items, and I don't believe for a second he intends to pay for them. This is a serious issue." Melissa blinked, taken aback by the force of Karen's words. "Ma'am, I see. Can you tell me exactly what this man has done?" Karen threw up her hands. "It's not just what he's done, it's how he's behaving. He's sneaky, he doesn't belong here, and frankly, I don't trust him." Melissa frowned slightly, her professional mask slipping for a moment. She'd dealt with Karen before and was all too familiar with her self-righteous attitude and thinly veiled prejudice. "I'll handle this," Melissa said diplomatically, even as doubt flickered in her mind. "Let's go speak with the gentleman in question." Karen smirked, satisfied that the manager was finally taking her side. She followed Melissa through the store, her heels clicking triumphantly against the floor. They found Daniel near the gourmet section, calmly examining a jar of imported olives. He looked up when he noticed Melissa and Karen approaching. His expression didn't change, though he felt the weight of Karen's glare bearing down on him. "Excuse me, sir," Melissa began, her tone neutral but professional. "I'm the manager here. My name is Melissa Grant. I understand there's been a concern raised about your shopping experience." Daniel's brow lifted slightly, though he remained composed. "I see. And what concern might that be?" Karen interjected before Melissa could speak. "You know exactly what the problem is. You're wandering around, acting like you own the place, and I don't believe for a second you're planning to pay for all that." Daniel turned to Karen, his expression calm but firm. "Ma'am, I've been nothing but respectful since I walked into this store. If you have evidence of any wrongdoing, I'd love to hear it." Karen huffed, glancing at Melissa for backup. "I don't need evidence. It's obvious. People like you don't shop in places like this. You're probably here to cause trouble." Melissa's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, Daniel spoke again. "Ms. Grant, is this how customers are typically treated here?" Melissa sighed, stepping forward. "No, sir, it's not. And I apologize for any inconvenience you've experienced. I'd like to ask a few questions, just to clear this up." Daniel nodded. "Of course. Ask away. Melissa hesitated, glancing at Karen, who was watching with barely concealed glee. May I take a look at the items in your cart and confirm your payment method? Daniel smiled faintly. Absolutely. He gestured to the cart, where neatly arranged items reflected his careful choices. I'll be paying with my account on file, which should already be listed in your system. Karen's smirk faded slightly. Account on file? What are you talking about? Daniel turned to her, his smile never wavering. It's a convenience I use as a frequent customer. I'm sure Ms. Grant can confirm. Melissa quickly accessed her tablet, pulling up the store's customer database. Her eyes widened slightly when she found Daniel's name and account details. A chill ran down her spine as realization dawned. Mr. Carter, she said, her voice more formal now. I see your account here. It's quite comprehensive. Daniel nodded. It should be. I recently acquired this grocery chain, including this store, as part of my business portfolio. Karen's face drained of color. You, what? She stammered. I own this store, Daniel said plainly, his tone steady but with an edge of authority. And I can't say I'm impressed with what I've witnessed today. Melissa froze, processing the implications. Mr. Carter, I had no idea. Please accept my sincerest apologies. Karen stepped back, her expression a mix of shock and panic. I didn't know. I mean, Daniel turned his full attention to her now. And that's the issue, isn't it? You didn't know anything about me, but you assumed the worst because of how I look. Do you realize how damaging that kind of behavior is? Not just to me, but to the community you claim to care about. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Her earlier bravado had completely evaporated. Ms. Grant, Daniel said, turning to Melissa. We need to have a conversation about the culture in this store. I won't tolerate this kind of treatment toward anyone, whether it's a customer or an employee. Melissa nodded quickly. Of course, Mr. Carter. I'll make sure this is addressed immediately. Daniel glanced at Karen one last time, his expression unreadable. Ma'am, I think we're done here. I suggest you reflect on your actions. Karen, her face flushed with humiliation, turned and walked away without another word. Her cart sat abandoned near the olive display, forgotten in her haste to escape. As Karen retreated in humiliation, Melissa stood frozen, the weight of the moment settling over her. Daniel, still calm but with an air of authority, placed the jar of olives into his cart and turned to Melissa. Ms. Grant, he said, breaking the silence, I think it's time we addressed the real issue here. Melissa nodded quickly. Yes, of course, Mr. Carter. I'm truly sorry for what happened. This is not how we conduct business in this store, or any of our stores. I'll take immediate steps to ensure this doesn't happen again. Daniel raised an eyebrow, his tone measured. I appreciate that, but apologies won't fix the systemic problem I just witnessed. This isn't just about Karen. It's about the environment that allowed her behavior to escalate unchecked. Melissa felt her stomach tighten. He was right. While she had stepped in to mediate, she realized she hadn't done enough to challenge Karen's assumptions or stand up for Daniel in the moment. Before she could respond, Daniel addressed the small crowd of onlookers that had gathered during the confrontation. Everyone, he said, his voice carrying through the store, I want to make something clear. I didn't come here today expecting to be the center of a spectacle. I came to shop, just like any of you. But what happened here is a reminder of the biases and assumptions that still persist in our society. And it's not acceptable. The crowd murmured among themselves, a mix of shame and admiration visible on their faces. Karen's absence was a stark contrast to the calm authority Daniel now displayed. Melissa, regaining her composure, cleared her throat. Mr. Carter, you're absolutely right. This behavior is unacceptable, and I take full responsibility for what happened in my store. I'll be working with our team to implement changes, immediately. Daniel nodded. Good. Let's start by addressing your staff. They need to know that this isn't just about customer service. It's about creating an environment of respect and inclusion. Melissa glanced at the employees who had gathered near the back of the store, watching intently. Everyone, she called out, her voice carrying an uncharacteristic firmness. Please meet me in the break room in 20 minutes. We're going to have an important discussion about what happened here today. Several employees exchanged glances, their curiosity and nervousness evident. Ella, the young cashier who had earlier defended Daniel, approached tentatively. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice soft but steady, "I want to apologize for not being able to do more earlier. I tried to stand up for you, but—" Daniel held up a hand to stop her. "Ella, you showed courage in a difficult moment. That's more than most people would do." "Thank you." Ella blushed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "I just wanted to do the right thing." Daniel smiled faintly. "And you did." The world needs more people willing to speak up when something isn't right. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Officer Brown, who had been quietly observing from the side. He approached Daniel with a nod of respect. "Mr. Carter, I want to apologize for the way things unfolded," Brown said. "I tried to handle it as professionally as possible, but I should have stepped in earlier." Daniel shook his hand firmly. "You did your job, Officer Brown, and I appreciate your professionalism. But this isn't about one moment. It's about creating a better system for everyone." Melissa, sensing an opportunity to regain some control, interjected. "Officer Brown, would you be willing to assist us in reviewing our security protocols? I think your perspective could be invaluable." Brown nodded. "Of course. Anything to make this place better for everyone." Meanwhile, Karen lingered outside the store, too humiliated to leave yet too stubborn to apologize. She replayed the events in her mind, each moment sharpening her shame. She had prided herself on being a model citizen, someone who upheld the values of her community. Now, she realized how far she had fallen from those ideals. A pair of teenage girls walked past her, whispering to each other. Karen caught the word racist and flinched as if struck. Her face burned as she hurried toward her car, vowing to never set foot in the store again. But as she drove away, a small voice in her mind whispered, "Maybe it's time to change." Back inside, Daniel and Melissa convened in her office. "Ms. Grant," Daniel began, "as the owner of this store, I believe in giving people the tools to succeed. This includes ensuring every employee and customer feels safe and respected." Melissa nodded, her notebook in hand. "Absolutely, Mr. Carter. What would you suggest as our next steps?" "First," Daniel said, "we need immediate staff training on recognizing and addressing bias. Every employee needs to understand how their actions, or inactions, can impact others. Second, I want to create a clear reporting system for incidents like this, so customers and employees alike feel empowered to speak up." Melissa jotted down notes furiously. "Understood. And I'll personally oversee these changes to make sure they're implemented properly." Daniel's expression softened slightly. "Thank you, Ms. Grant. I believe in this store, and I believe in its people. Let's make it a place we can all be proud of." Melissa smiled, feeling a sense of renewed purpose. "We'll make it happen, Mr. Carter. You have my word." As Daniel and Melissa concluded their meeting, word of the incident continued to ripple through the store. Employees whispered about the confrontation, and customers shared their own observations. Karen's behavior had left a sour impression on everyone who had witnessed it, but Daniel's calm demeanor and authoritative presence had made an even greater impact. In the break room, Melissa addressed the gathered employees. Most of them sat quietly, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. Ella stood near the back, nervously wringing her hands, while Officer Brown leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "Everyone," Melissa began, "I want to talk about what happened today. An unacceptable situation unfolded in our store, and it's something we need to address immediately." She paused, glancing at Daniel, who stood to her side. He gave her a small nod, encouraging her to continue. "Bias and discrimination have no place here," Melissa continued. "Not in our store, not in our community, and certainly not in our company. I want to make it clear that every customer and every employee deserves to be treated with respect, no matter what." The employees exchanged uneasy glances, some nodding in agreement. Melissa gestured to Daniel. "As some of you may know, Mr. Daniel Carter, the owner of this store, was the customer involved in today's incident. He has some things he'd like to share." Daniel stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Thank you, Ms. Grant," he said. "Let me start by saying this. I didn't come here today expecting to reveal who I am. I came to shop, just like anyone else. What happened was disappointing, but unfortunately, not surprising. His gaze swept the room, meeting the eyes of each employee. Bias, whether conscious or unconscious, is something we all have to work against. The question is, what are we doing to ensure it doesn't harm others? Today, I saw courage from some of you, he said, glancing at Ella, but I also saw hesitation. I don't blame you for that. It's not easy to stand up in the moment. That's why we need to create a culture where doing the right thing isn't just encouraged, it's expected. Ella blushed at his acknowledgement, while a few employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Daniel continued. Starting today, this store will implement new policies to address these issues. There will be mandatory training for every employee on recognizing and addressing bias. We're also setting up an anonymous reporting system so anyone, employee or customer, can report incidents without fear. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. If we want this store to thrive, we need to be better. Not just for our customers, but for each other. The room was silent for a moment before Melissa spoke again. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I know this might be a lot to process, but these changes are necessary. If anyone has questions or concerns, my door is always open. Officer Brown added, and if you ever see something wrong, speak up. You'll always have my support. Meanwhile, Karen sat at her kitchen table, replaying the day's events in her mind. Her hands trembled as she sipped a cup of tea, but it did little to calm her nerves. The shame she felt was new and unfamiliar, like a heavy weight pressing on her chest. Her husband, Greg, walked into the room and frowned at her pale complexion. Karen, what's wrong? He asked. I made a mistake, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Greg raised an eyebrow. A mistake? What kind of mistake? Karen hesitated, then told him everything. The parking lot confrontation, the accusations, the revelation that Daniel owned the store. As she spoke, Greg's expression shifted from concern to disappointment. Karen, he said slowly, do you realize how bad this looks? You accused an innocent man of theft. Just because, what? He didn't look like he belonged. Tears welled in Karen's eyes. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I don't know. I was frustrated, and You let your frustration turn into something ugly, Greg interrupted. You need to fix this. Karen stared at him, her guilt deepening. How can I? He'll never forgive me. Maybe not, Greg said. But you still owe him an apology. Back at the store, Daniel prepared to leave, his cart now filled with the items he'd originally come to buy. As he approached the checkout line, Ella hurried over to him. Mr. Carter, she said nervously, holding a small envelope in her hands. Yes? Daniel asked, his tone warm. I wanted to give you this, she said, handing him the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note of apology and gratitude. Daniel read the note, his smile growing. Ella, this is thoughtful. Thank you. But you have nothing to apologize for. You did the right thing today. Ella's face lit up. I just wanted you to know that I'm committed to making this store a better place. Daniel nodded. And I believe you will. Keep standing up for what's right, and you'll go far. The next day, as Daniel reviewed plans for the store's new training program, he received an unexpected call. Melissa handed him the phone, her expression unreadable. It's Karen, she said quietly. Daniel hesitated, then took the phone. This is Daniel Carter. On the other end, Karen's voice trembled. Mr. Carter, this is Karen Whitefield. I wanted to apologize for what I said and did yesterday. It was wrong, and I realize now how hurtful I was. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed to say I'm sorry. Daniel was silent for a moment, considering his response. Finally, he said, Thank you for apologizing, Karen. I hope this experience helps you reflect and grow. Change doesn't happen overnight, but recognizing the problem is the first step. Karen's voice cracked. Thank you for being so understanding. I'll do better. I promise. What do you think can Karen truly change of her behavior? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave you thinking long after the final word. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next story. Don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.